Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. Beneath the cover of a heavy twilight, the small town of Eldridge lay mostly silent, its streets draped in a shroud of unease. The scent of autumn lingered in the air, a crisp reminder of the changing seasons. Yet it did little to mask the palpable tension that had enveloped the community. A sense of dread wound its way through the narrow alleys and quaint homes, whispering its warnings to anyone brave or foolish enough to remain outside after dark. Nestled at the bottom of the valley, Eldridge wore a facade of normalcy, with its humble shops and well-kept gardens. But beneath this veneer simmered a legacy of secrets and sins. The townsfolk exchanged worried glances, and hushed voices filled the oak-paneled taverns, speculation worming its way into conversations once reserved for small talk. The recent disappearance of Melissa Reed, a beloved local teacher, had sucked the air from the town's spirits. Melissa was last seen 3 nights ago, her laughter echoing through the school's hallways like a distant memory. Now the vibrant life she emitted was replaced by a grappling darkness that crept into the hearts of her friends and neighbors. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, the flickering streetlights cast elongated shadows down the sidewalks. Shadows that did little to ward off the fear growing in the pit of every stomach. While the local police were busy handing out flyers and interviewing those who might have seen her last, rumors began to ricochet off the walls of the school, the grocery store, and the diner. The only truth left known for certain was that someone had vanished, leaving nothing but confusion and a town on edge. The victim, Melissa Reed, was not merely a name whispered in hallways. She was the keystone of Eldridge's community. A devoted teacher, her life was a tapestry woven with compassion and creativity. Each child she taught became a fragment of her heart, carefully nurtured within the classroom, decorated with bright, homemade crafts, an expansive library filled with tales from around the world. Her laughter was infectious, resonating through every corner of the school, a sound now painfully absent. Friends described her as spirited and generous, always the first to volunteer for community events, whether it was organizing bake sales or orchestrating talent shows. The annual fall festival had been her passion, a tradition that brought the entire town together. Yet this year, it was overshadowed by dread and uncertainty. Just days prior, Melissa had been gathering supplies for the event, her enthusiasm palpable as she roamed the aisles of the local market, selecting pumpkins and crafts with a sparkle in her eye. The day she went missing began like any other. She left her apartment, her backpack slung over her shoulder, a flurry of papers clutched in her hand as she hurried to meet her students. While her absence was marked by worried texts among friends, much of the day unfolded as routine for the townsfolk. Melissa had a habit of making plans. She was never one to stray far from her commitments. But as night fell, the truth began to settle in. Something wasn't right. With each passing hour, the weight of the unknown became suffocating. Her phone was found on the school grounds, screen cracked but functional, a stark reminder that even the most vibrant lives can be dimmed in an instant. The search parties roamed the surrounding woods and fields, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness, but Melissa remained elusive. As her face appeared in the papers, her image twisted from joyful teacher to a haunting symbol of fear. The community could feel the weight of the mystery settle heavily across their town. The crime scene. The search for Melissa Reed intensified as volunteers scoured Eldridge outskirts, But it was an unpredicted discovery that would steer the investigation in a grim direction. Just 3 days after Melissa's disappearance, a local farmer had returned to check on his fields. It was in a distant corner of his property, amid the marshy ground and overgrown weeds, that he stumbled upon a discarded bag. It was unmistakably Melissa purse-sized, navy blue canvas bag embossed with her initials. Heart racing and stomach churning, the farmer called the authorities, who arrived within moments. They cordoned off the area, their urgency palpable as they alerted additional teams, including forensics and K-9 units. Each small marker they placed in the damp earth filled the air with a heavier kind of dread. As detectives began examining the scene, the expanse of the landscape felt unforgiving. So close to the sound of rustling leaves and the distant quirk of animals, the area seemed utterly ordinary. Yet it was awash with a chilling black mark, something sinister lingering in the air. Moments later, they discovered footprints leading further into the woods. Tracks muddied and barely visible, but unmistakably human. Amid the frantic search for evidence, Amelia Thompson, the lead investigator, examined the backpack meticulously. Inside, she found crumpled papers, a half-eaten granola bar, and most disturbing, a small, frayed scrap of fabric that had not been there moments before. Tension tightened around Amelia, instinctively signaling that this was not simply a case of a missing person. The team processed the scene systematically, using the last known traces where Melissa had last walked, the remnants of her bag, and the impressions left in the earth to build a timeline. The tendrils of fear only tightened as they traced her last steps, each new finding offering as many questions as answers. There was a growing urgency in the air, spurred by the understanding that with every moment lost, the distance between them and Melissa continued to stretch. The early investigation. As dawn broke over Eldridge, the pale sunlight struggled to cut through the heavy fog that clung to the ground like a desperate embrace. The remnants of the previous night's search still hung in the air. Investigators gathered in the makeshift command center beside the school, a hub of anxious energy. Evidence was pouring in, with officers scouring the neighborhood for potential witnesses, or anyone who may have seen Melissa during the hours leading to her disappearance. Detective Amelia Thompson stood in front of a whiteboard, its surface cluttered with photos of Melissa, timelines, and vague connections. A sense of urgency propelled her as she initiated the first round of interviews. Sitting across the table at a temporary station set up in the gymnasium, she turned to Lisa Mercer, one of Melissa's closest friends. Yeah, I need you to think back. Amelia pressed gently, her voice patient but firm. Was there anything unusual in her behavior leading up to this? Did she mention feeling threatened or anxious about anything? Swallowing hard, Lisa's eyes glossed over with tears. No, not really. Melissa was happy. She planned everything for the fall festival and talked about how excited she was to see her students. Just there was this weird vibe in the days before she went missing. Like something unspoken, she recalled, her voice fractured. As the hours passed, the detective and her team delved deeper into Melissa's life. They scrutinized her online presence, combed through social media for any cryptic messages or unfamiliar interaction. Even mundane interactions began to gain significance under the scrutiny. A chance encounter with a local man, a stranger she'd caught arguing with her neighbor weeks prior, all seemingly innocuous. now magnified by the lens of concern. There were no shortage of theories, but they began to fold into a singular narrative. She had not vanished by her own choice. Collectively, a somber understanding settled over the team. Melissa's disappearance was not a mere mystery to solve, but an active investigation with a growing urgency to uncover what had transpired in the shadows of Eldridge. The dead ends. As the days slipped by, the tension in Eldridge thickened like an impending storm. Lingering whispers filled the air, each bit of gossip dragging the investigation into deeper waters. The search for Melissa Reed began to encounter obstacles that few had anticipated. Initially buoyed by the community's support, the growing frustrations of the detectives crept in with each unanswered question, an unyielding lead that spiraled into a dead end. Detective Amelia Thompson meticulously guided her team through follow-up interviews, from nosy neighbors to local shop owners. Yet, as they combed through each account, clarity became an elusive ghost. A local handyman reported seeing a woman matching Melissa's description near the river, but upon further questioning, it was revealed he had mistaken her for a childhood friend. Another witness claimed to have spotted Melissa walking with a shadowy figure late one evening, only to later backtrack on their statement, creating an unnerving sense of doubt. Adding to the chaos, reports of suspicious vehicles parked near the woods emerged but turned out to belong to a group of photographers scouting the area for an upcoming project. Each promising lead that twinkled like a star flickered out as quickly as it appeared. Beneath these swirling uncertainties, Amelia's determination was resolute. She ordered further searches of the areas surrounding the town while revisiting locations tied to Melissa's daily routine. With each shift of the investigation, the weight of their findings pressed upon them every false claim, a reminder that farther from truth lay the shadows, and uncertainties mounted like a suffocating fog. Increasingly, the emotional toll began to bleed into Amelia's work. The cries of family members, lost in worry and despair, haunted her thoughts like dark specters. She knew all too well that unless they uncovered a definitive lead soon, the twilight of hope could easily extend into despair. As nights grew colder and the leaves fell from the trees, so too did morale among the residents of Eldridge. The pounding rhythm of uncertainty remained. A break in the case. After weeks of fruitless searching, the town of Eldridge buzzed with an unexpected surge of hope, fueled by the re-examination of a crucial piece of evidence from Melissa's phone discovered on the school ground. Surveillance footage captured a glimpse of her last known movements. Amelia and her team recatalogued data, with renewed vigor surfacing as they untangled her digital footprint. The breakthrough came with a call from the tech unit, their voice crackling over the line. "Detective Thompson, we've managed to recover messages from her phone. Some sent and received just days before she went missing." Gathered around a table strewn with reports and notes, the team leaned closer as Amelia pulled up the screen, displaying encrypted messages. Among mundane exchanges about school activities, something stood out: a strange message from an unfamiliar number sent only hours before her disappearance. It read, "You can't escape what you've done. Meet me if you want to talk." The air in the room thickened, tastes of adrenaline mixing with anxiety. Old friends gathered together in the small town of Eldridge whispered only of memories. They could hardly fathom what had transpired in the shadowed corners of their lives. Who was this sender? What did they mean by what you've done? Armed with this new information, a sense of purpose flickered to life within Amelia as she rallied her investigators. We must identify this number immediately. Push our tech team for answers. This could lead us closer to understanding why she was targeted, she urged, her voice steady against the tumult. Within hours, the contact revealed itself as Jacob Turner, a disaffected former student of Melissa's, rumored to have been troubled and distant since graduation. Investigators identified him as someone known for his erratic behavior, and while he had become somewhat of a recluse, there were whispers within the community of his obsession with Melissa's teachings, and a perceived betrayal stemming from her earlier reprimands. The winds of uncertainty screamed louder now, pressing upon them both dread and determination. The team mobilized swiftly, understanding that this veered into vulnerable territory. They were not merely chasing shadows anymore. They were on the brink of discovering what had happened to the woman who embodied the spirit of this town. The suspect. The investigation unfolded like a tangle of threads leading to Jacob Turner. With the unsettling mixture of excitement and trepidation, Detective Amelia Thompson prepared to face the man whose cryptic message had ignited a flicker of hope in solving Melissa's case. His whereabouts tracked to an abandoned home on the outskirts of Eldridge. The team's approach was deliberate, each step heavy with purpose as they made their way past the overgrown weeds and chipped paint that bore testament to neglect. As they knocked on the door, the unsettling silence that enveloped the house was almost tangible. It reluctantly creaked open, revealing Jacob's sunken eyes and pallor, suggesting a life lived in seclusion. His hair fell messily into his face, an unsettling contrast against the worn furniture and stacks of unprocessed mail that lined the floor. The atmosphere felt thick. An electrical charge hung in the air as Amelia introduced herself. "We need to ask you a few questions about Melissa Reed," she said, her tone steady, piercing through the tension. Jacob flinched as her words hung in the air, revealing a flicker of recognition in his bleary gaze. "I don't know anything about her," he replied defensively, drawing further into the shadows of his doorstep. Amelia pressed on, her voice firm but calm. "Your number was found in her phone. We need to understand who you are and what that message meant." Compelled by the pressure, Jacob began to unravel. He mumbled about feeling misunderstood, of straying from the path he had carved for himself, and the fear of disappointing those he held dear. But when the talk turned to Melissa, his countenance darkened. Defeated, he muttered of a conversation that had turned sour, where he had sought her guidance in vain. Although his responses flitted between agitated erraticism and dodged truths, patterns formed in Amelia's mind, swirling with the weight of the unresolved. He spoke of being overlooked and accused of wrongdoings that he claimed had followed him through his academic life. Yet as he shifted nervously, beads of sweat cropping up on his face, Amelia sensed a deeper wound. Underneath the discontent lay a complex dynamic of obsession and resentment. Taking in his demeanor, Amelia recognized that peeling back the layers of Jacob would require patience. It was evident that he held pivotal knowledge about Melissa's final moments. What that haunting message had hinted at could just be the key to unlocking the pathway that led them closer to her fate. The trial, months after the harrowing search and investigation, the courtroom buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and despair. The trial of Jacob Turner had finally begun, and the air was charged with palpable tension. News media sprawled outside the courthouse, their cameras trained on the granite facade, eager for the details of a case that had captured a town's deep-rooted fears and long-standing hopes. Inside, the atmosphere was serious. Amelia Thompson sat near the front, a comforting presence for Melissa's heartbroken family, who filled the spectator benches with a palpable heaviness woven into their expression. Each whispering murmur echoed against the cold marble walls, a constant reminder that justice was on trial that day. The proceedings opened with the prosecution laying out their case, painting a grim portrait of Jacob's mental state following years of disengagement from society. Prosecutors presented evidence: the threatening message found on Melissa's phone, witness accounts detailing his obsessive behavior, and the details of their final confrontation reconstructed through testimonies. The narrative was haunting. Each statement provided another piece to the puzzle of Melissa's disappearance. In contrast, Jacob's defense attempted to spin a narrative of innocence, claiming the messages were merely the ramblings of a distressed man misunderstood by his former teacher, a cry for help rather than a threat. As they questioned witnesses, it became evident that Jacob's fragile mental state was pivotal to the defense's strategy, swirling sympathy into the sails of a sinking case. But cracks began to show during cross-examinations. The prosecutor probed deeper, revealing Jacob's obsessive patterns that spanned years, tantrums directed at authority figures, unyielding fixation on Melissa's career, and his unsettling presence near the school before her disappearance. Amelia observed Jacob as his confidence flickered, his words stammering erratically under pressure. With every piece of evidence presented, the gravity of the situation deepened. It felt like a collective heartbeat resonated through the room with each revelation. In the minds of the jury, a decision began to form, a journey from judgment to an unnamed yearning for closure. Outside the courthouse, the town clung to the hope of resolution. The weight of Melissa's absence etched deeply in their collective consciousness. With each day, the trial unearthed complexities of life, choice, and consequences, showing that the threads of everyone's lives were voluminous, intertwined beyond comprehension. The aftermath. As the verdict was read, silence enveloped the courtroom, a strained stillness that felt as suffocating as a blanket of freshly fallen snow. Jacob Turner was found guilty on all counts murder in the first degree, a gavel's echo sealing the statement that resonated like thunder through the halls. Relief, mixed with profound sorrow, cascaded over Melissa's family and the town. The burden of her absence would remain. Yet justice had been served in this long-awaited moment. In the days that followed, Eldridge began to grapple with the tumult of emotions that surfaced from the trial's conclusion. Gatherings at Melissa's favorite haunts filled their normally vibrant spaces with an unmistakable heaviness, voices tighter as they reminisced about her infectious laughter and the gentle lessons she had imparted to young minds. Each coffee shop conversation and community meeting served as a reminder of their collective loss, a palpable wound stitched together with the shared memories of Melissa's shining light. Detective Amelia Thompson watched from the sidelines as the townsfolk sought normalcy amid the grief. The once crisp autumn air hung thick with unresolved pain, yet underneath lay an undeniable resilience. Many began to volunteer, organizing foundations in Melissa's name, dedicating scholarships for aspiring teachers, and hosting initiatives that honored her commitment to education. She had brought the community together in life, and now her legacy anchored them in their search for healing. With the passage of time, mourning morphed into action. While the fear reverberating through the town gradually dulled, the lingering shadows of doubt remained. Questions of how such darkness could flourish within a seemingly peaceful community danced through conversation. Yet with every project undertaken in Melissa's name, hope blossomed in the hearts of those left behind. Amelia herself felt her purpose deepen. She became an embedded advocate for victims' rights, reflecting on the myriad of lives that intersected with the investigation. Each time she visited schools or community forums, she carried with her Melissa's story, a testament to lost potential and the healing power of connection. The invisible threads tying Eldridge together tightened as they embraced their shared resolve to learn from the past and ensure that no voice would go unheard again. In the quiet moments, Melissa's memory lingered a beacon, whispering that love could bloom even from the darkest of places, propelling them all toward a future built on resilience, compassion, and unyielding hope. Reflection. As the seasons shifted and time wove its gentle thread through the heart of Eldridge, change became palpable. Detective Amelia Thompson often found herself wandering the familiar paths where Melissa had once laughed and talked. The vibrant colors of the trees stood in contrast against the winter's impending chill. And it was here, amid the whispers of the wind, that she found herself reflecting on the past year. The haunting echoes of the case threaded through her thoughts like shadows, each fragment a reminder that underneath even the most ordinary lives lay complexities beyond comprehension. Justice had been served in a way that felt both significant and hollow. For every person like Melissa, there were myriad others whose stories were unheard, whose lives could shift in an instant. Amelia felt the weight of this truth deeply. Each day spent in the community felt intertwined with purpose, as she encouraged others to speak out, share their stories, and seek connection. She had seen firsthand the difference a strong support system could create, the compassion a compassionate community could foster, and she longed to help communicate stories that matter. All who were touched by Melissa left with pieces of her spirit. In their laughter, their acts of kindness, even their grief. In the silence that fell over Eldridge every now and then, a subtle understanding echoed a commitment to forever honor those whose lives were taken too soon, to ensure that the beauty of existence would prevail against the shadows. In the heart of every person twinkled the light of memory, a flame fed by love, resilience, and hope. It became clear to Amelia that even in tragedy, bonds could be formed, and legacies could live on, bloomed from love in the face of overwhelming darkness.